Hi everyone, my name is Nuno from Sound Particles, and it's a pleasure to be here today to give you the new update of SkyDust 3D. As you know, we released SkyDust a few months ago at NAMM. Then we released update 1.1 with support for MPE. So far, we are getting fantastic reviews from Sound on Sound, Music Radar, Future Music, a lot of music legends out there using our synthesizer. And now we are giving you version 1.5 with a lot of new features that I'm sure that you're going to love. Among those features, you have the ability now to import your own samples, so you can bring your own material into the synthesizer instead of using the typical oscillators. Also, regarding oscillators, now you have 100 waves for you to choose, a lot of new waveform modifiers, Waveshapers, around 100 also, improvements in terms of envelope generators that now with different curves, or the ability to use envelope generators only during the release, new audio effects, modulation like chorus and phasers, and a lot of new things. So let's take a look. Okay, so let's take a look of the number one feature of SkyDust 1.5, and that is the ability to import samples. It's by far the most requested feature that we got from our users. So now with SkyDust you are able to import your own recording and use that instead of the typical oscillator. So let's start here with a basic template like basic sine. Okay, so what we're going to do is, instead of saying okay use a sine, we're going to tell the oscillators use this recording as your source material. So let's come here, I'm going to import an audio file. Okay, now I'm going to import the sound of a helicopter, and now we have this helicopter over here. So as you can see, I have the helicopter, and I can use this sound of helicopter within this oscillator, and I could use oscillator 2 with a different sample, oscillator 3 with another sample, and so on. Also, the sample will be pitch shift as a vary speed, which means that if I'm playing middle C, I get this. If I get 1 octave below, I get this, 1 octave above. Okay. So one of the things that you can see is that below the name of the sample, now there is this pop-up button where you can say, okay, do you want to treat this sample as a pitch or unpitch? If it is pitch, it means that as long you start playing the notes, it's going to do a pitch shifting on the sound. If you want to treat this as unpitch and say, okay, it doesn't matter where you play, you get always the same sound, because so imagine, for instance, that you have here a second oscillator as a sine, and you want this to be in pitch, and then the... Okay. Also, in here you have several possibilities in terms of looping. So if you by default considers once, which means that it's going to play the sample from the beginning until the end, and you get silence after that. If you want to loop, when you reach the end, it's going to go back for the beginning and start from there. If you select forward and backward, what happens is that it's going to play until the end and then going to play backwards to the beginning and vice versa. So it's pretty much going forward and backward until you finish the sample. Also, if you are using this for a musical instrument, okay, imagine that you have a recording of a clarinet, of a cello, or something else, or a pipe organ, or whatever, you can bring this. By default, the system will consider that sample as being a C, a middle C, okay? Nonetheless, you can come here and say, okay, imagine that your sample is actually an A, or some other note. Eventually, you can come here and say, yes, treat this as being an A, which means that now that sound is going to be considered as an A, to make sure that everything is in tune. So this is the first feature. Let's see the next one. Okay, so the next feature is the number of waveforms that SkyDust brings. The previous version had around 10 or 12 waveforms for you to choose from. Now there is a lot of waveforms for you to choose. So come here to our basic template. So as you can see, there is here the sine, but now you open this and you see there is a lot of waves over here for you to play with. Yes, we have the basic ones, sine, triangles, and so on, okay, but then multiple variations for you to choose. Also, to make things much more intuitive, because you are on the flow, you are testing new things. Now what happens is that now you have these arrows on the sides for you to go and select the multiple waves. So for instance, so as you can see, there is a lot of waveforms for you to choose from and to get the fantastic sound that you're looking for. One of the things that SkyDust always had was this concept of wave modifiers or Waveshapers that allow to take a basic waveform and create a modifier, a wave shape, creating new shapes with it. What we've done with the current version was to highly increase the number of those modifiers. On the previous versions we had around 8 modifiers or so. Now we have around 100. So let's take a look of here. So pretty much imagined here I have a sine wave. Simply by adding this modifier now, you change the waveform, allowing to get much more interesting results. As you can see now, we have this organized, because there are so many, into folders. One of them is phase modifiers. What they do is simply change the phase, and by changing the phase, of course, they will also change the waveform. And then we have another modifiers that only change the amplitude of things, so it's pretty much based on the amplitude. Other way, you can come here and simply start playing with things and get different. So as you can see, even with a basic sine wave, you can create very interesting variations of this. Also, considering that we have this parameter here, okay, of course you can modulate this parameter and get interesting results. What we have done with SkyDust 1.5 is that now when you come here to the oscillator, yes, we have here the envelope generator and the LFO. By default, the LFO, most of the times on previous versions, were used only to control gain, but now you have the possibility of using the LFO to control this waveform modifier. So now when you put here, okay, and you start, okay, so you can now use the LFO to control these modifiers, or for instance, imagine that it's okay, let's put noise steps. So a lot of fantastic things that you can do, even with very basic waveforms, using the new Waveshapers of SkyDust. So one of the things that we improve also at SkyDust is the audio effects. So we have now new audio effects, but also new improvement. Starting with improvement, now when you go for delay, you're going to see two new parameters. One of them is this mirror mode instead of the classic one. So the mirror, what happens is that now the delays are going to flipped sides, so something coming from the left now goes to the right, something coming from the left surrounds now going to the right surrounds, so you get something almost like this. So as you can see, anything that comes from one side, the delay now plays on the opposite side, and this allows you to create much more interesting, both in stereo, but also with spatial. The other thing that you notice is that now you have the ability, instead of using only the absolute value for time delay, you can now sync this to the host. So now you can start using this and say, okay, it's a quarter note or eighth note as the time of the delay. This is some of the improvements of the delay, and like I mentioned, there is other things over here. There is now several modulation effects like flanger. So a lot of things for you to play with, and I hope you enjoyed. One of the things that you're going to notice now at SkyDust is something regarding envelope generators. So one of the things that you're going to notice is that now you have multiple curves over here to choose from. So as you can see, you have this envelope generator, but how you want exactly to go from start to peak? Yes, it's this attack time, but do you want the curve to be linear, exponential, logarithmic, and so on? So now you have multiple curves here. So with the same settings, yes, it's going to take that time to go from attack and release and decay, all of those things. But now you can change the curve exactly. And instead of using a kind of a curve editor, the idea is to now you simply come here and select the curve that you are want to use. The second thing that you notice is that now there is a new kind of envelope generator that is called, we call the release. Pretty much it's something that makes sure that this is only activated when you release the note. So pretty much the oscillator is going to be in silence and then going to be enabled only on release. This was something that was requested by some users that allow you to something to happen only during the release phase. So let's take a look. For instance, imagine here we have two signs, okay? We have these two signs. Let's put the first one with a fast attack, okay? Okay, so when I play, you get this attack and then it dies. And now let's use oscillator 2, okay, but now using this release, which means that we're going to only get sound after the release. So pretty much I'm playing. So as you can see, interesting things that you can do. Okay, only on release. So if you want to do some kind of release sound, special sound on release, this is the right envelope generator to achieve that. One of the things that you may notice is that now the main page is slightly different, especially on this preset area. So now you have the artist name on top of the preset name. Also there is the search feature that is new here, because with hundreds of presets, looking for that preset that you're looking for, it's much difficult. So imagine that, okay, I'm looking for a preset that is called ARP something. So you simply write the term that you're looking for and you filter everything that has that word on it. Also, in terms of filtering, you are able to filter and show only the factory presets or your own presets, or by artists, because imagine that you say, okay, I really like the presets from this artist or that. Also, you can filter, of course, by type. You can even change the sorting if you want the factory order or by name or by type, or simply clear all the filters to make sure that everything goes back to the beginning with all the presets available in here. So I hope you find the preset that you are looking for. Besides all of these features that we've been talking today, there is also minor improvements that we made at SkyDust. One of them is now when you go to settings, you get here a table with all the MIDI learn that the synthesizer has, okay? Because we have the matrix, but the matrix applies only to that preset, and MIDI learn applies to every single preset. It's almost like a hardware-based settings. So now every time that you do some kind of MIDI learn, you're going to see here on this list that entry for you to know exactly what things that you used in the past in terms of MIDI learn. The other thing that we also made improvement is that now you see the number of the speakers here. Depending on the format that you are choosing, you're going to see exactly where are the speakers. So if you are panning things around and you are saying, okay, I'm panning this, I'm using this as a 7.1 point, for instance, 7.1.4, okay, and now I want to put a sound precisely on that speaker over there. So first you know exactly these positions. Of course, for 7.1 it's clear because it was these corners around, okay. Now if you want to put the sounds near to that speaker in particular, you can do this, or if you want, you can use now the modifier shift for you to snap to a position in particular, okay, if you want this to go to a particular position over here. So Using Shift, now you go snapping directly to that speaker if you want this oscillator to go exactly to that speaker. So these are some of the new features and improvements of SkyDust 1.5. I really hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to send your feedback, send your requests for upcoming features, because we really love to hear from our users. And stay tuned, there is a lot of things happening on the upcoming months.